Hey, it's Brian here. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Go Be More podcast. For those of you who've never heard of Go Be More Apparel, I just want to take a moment to tell you what we're about. We believe we all have a responsibility to chase our dreams, and we want to give you the motivation, the mindset, and the permission to do it. We want our apparel to be a constant reminder of your commitment to achieving your goals, and we want the words Go Be More to remind you of your dreams and your next steps every time you see them. As for this podcast, every Tuesday I speak with John Rankin, world-class miler, kidney disease survivor, and founder of Go Be More, about topics that will help to unlock your potential and get you moving forward. Every Friday, we interview a special guest to learn more about their Go Be More journey. In this episode, we speak with Cristina Audencial, the morning news anchor for Fox 5 San Diego. Cristina walks us through the ups and downs of her career in news, from her first audition in high school to working as a writer-producer, reporter, and now anchor. It wasn't always a smooth journey, however. Cristina shares why she left the business entirely before coming back and eventually winning an Emmy for her reporting on Typhoon Yolanda in 2013. She shares how the experience changed her life and the fine line of being a professional and human in her work. Cristina was a joy to speak with, and we're sure you're going to love this conversation. All right, on to the episode. Cristina, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us, Cristina. We appreciate your time and are super excited to share your story with our audience.
And we really appreciate your patience as we've just struggled to get this going here. I'm just going to address it up front because I think it's just part of the reality of doing this. We've been having some technical issues and you have been so great. I really appreciate it. Thank you for bearing with us.
Oh, no problem. I understand this all too well.
Cristina, you have a really interesting background filled with early childhood travel throughout the world. You're born in the Philippines. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience growing up? And that, I think, will lead us a little bit into the career that you've chosen.
Well, yes, I was born in the Philippines, born in Subic Bay. My dad was in the U.S. Navy, so we moved around a lot. And for the most part of my childhood, it was overseas. So it was Philippines, Guam, Japan, Singapore, and eventually we did head to San Diego when I was still in middle school. But then, Dad got orders, we have to go to Singapore. And of course, I was really upset about it to leave San Diego because I really felt like this is where I wanted to call home. But I had to finish out my high school career in Singapore. And actually that ended up being a blessing, because if it weren't for that place, I wouldn't be where I am today. And now, we ended up going back to San Diego where I went to school. My dad ended up retiring here. So that's how we moved around a lot. It was because of the military.
You mentioned in going to Singapore that you were upset about it, but it kind of opened the door for where you are today. And I'm curious, when you say that, did you get your start in pursuing a career in the news in Singapore?
Well, so it was actually in Singapore that I realized that I did want to end up in news, only because, I grew up wanting to be a marine biologist when I was a kid. And then that dream then started to fade when I was pretty much in high school. And I felt like this mounting pressure to want to know what I wanted to do. I went to an international school, and, all these students that I went to school with knew exactly what they wanted to do. And I was just like, gosh, how come I don't know? And, I was getting pressure from my parents too, like, you're going to go to college and this and that, and you're going to get a really good career. And I was just like, but I don't know what I want to do yet. So it happened by accident. I use the term accident very loosely. Don't believe in coincidence. Don't believe in accidents. I believe everything is it happens for a reason.
Right on.
But essentially, we had a student-run production in Singapore for the students, by the students, and you would do a morning show. So you'd have the students who would present the morning announcements. You had a cameraman, you had a director, you had a producer. We were all students. And in order to be one of the anchors, you had to audition. And it was a really good friend of mine who wanted to do it. And she was like, Cristina, you got to do this with me. You have to audition with me. And I thought, I don't want to do that. I'm like, who wants to face your, classmates in the morning where you're still rubbing the morning out of your eyes and all that stuff. She was like, it's just an audition. Just do it for me because I need a co-anchor. Okay, so we go ahead and do it. I ended up getting it, and she didn't.
Oh, no.
And it's right. It's weird. It's so weird how that all plays out. But instead of, going up to our teacher, Mr. Clemens, and saying, hey, I really don't want to do this, because I had that option to say, I'm just kidding. I'm just going to step back and let someone else take it. I actually said, you know what, I'm going to do it, because I also thought if he saw something in me that I didn't know that I had, maybe that's something worth looking into. And it turns out I really enjoyed writing it. Teachers would give us their announcements. We would have to write it into our own words, which is a lot like the news today. And I basically I really dove in head first. And all of a sudden I was in yearbook, and I was in the newspaper and the audiovisual classes. And all of a sudden I was into it. I didn't know what, but just in this arena was what I wanted to do. We went to a field trip, Singapore, CNBC Asia, which is headquartered there. And it was the first time I'd ever been in a newsroom. And as soon as I walked in and I saw people just kind of doing their thing, but you could feel the electricity. I say that, I don't know what it is, but it's like I could feel the energy from the room, and I was like, oh, this is it. Wow. Like, this is what I want to do. And I was so excited. I was kind of dancing around, like, behind my classmates. I was kind of like tapping, like, ooh, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. It was hilarious. And they take us into the studio, and the anchors, I think, had just finished one of their news blocks, so they were in commercial break. And they were very kind. They were waving to us from the desk, like, hey, how are you guys doing? And, welcome. And I hope we don't scare you guys off and things like that. They were just being really nice and funny. And then their floor director says, stand by, 3, 2. And it's funny because all of us were like, oh, like, you have to be quiet because they're about to go live. And here they are, and they're still talking. Like, they're counting 3, 2, and they're like, oh, blah, blah, blah. And like, still talking to us. And it was until the very last second. Then suddenly they were so composed, and they were live, bringing the news to all of Asia, because this is CNBC Asia. This isn't a local thing.
Wow, so that's cool.
So I was like, what just happened? Their composure and their presence and their professionalism, from going to, hey, how are you, to this is today's news. There was just something about it. And it was in that moment that I said, okay, now that's what I'm going to do when I get into a newsroom. I want to be in their seat. So that's how it's. So if I hadn't gone to Singapore, I might have never had that chance. So yes,
it also sounds like that teacher who identified something in you when you auditioned, and had a really big impact, it sounds, on your high school experience, obviously on your entire life.
Absolutely. He actually straight called me crazy one day. He said,
oh no.
Because it took a lot of work, because you take yearbook and you take the newspaper on, and I didn't want just a little writing gig. I wanted a good chunk. I was also in choir at the time, so he goes, okay, why don't you head our arts and entertainment for the yearbook and the newspaper? So I was taking on these big roles, and he was trusting me with them. And I would grab the camera one day, and that wasn't even my role, and I was like, let me just go around the campus and shoot. And he goes, gosh, you're really into this. And he just knew that a lot of the stuff that we were doing, it wasn't just meant for in the classroom. There was a lot of work outside, and it was a lot of late nights in the classroom, trying to get things done, because you're dealing with deadlines. You're really learning how to meet deadlines that were being given to you. And so he was like, you're crazy. Because you're in 4 of my classes. Like, how are you juggling everything? But I was having the time of my life. And that's how I figure. I'm like, oh no, if this is what it is, this is what I want to do.
So how did you take that from that experience and go forward after you graduated? What were your next steps at that point?
Well, I went to school. I went to UCSD. This is where we ended up back in San Diego as a family, and I didn't really have a choice of which college I wanted to go to. My dad had his own dreams for his children. Like, kids are going to UCSD. He was in love with the school, so and if they're paying for a tuition, there's okay, right. We're gonna go.
I already have plans for my daughter. She's gonna go to Juilliard, so or become an astronaut. So so dads do that. We do that.
Yeah.
So obviously it's not a school known for journalism, but I went in and talked to a counselor, and she recommended that I just take an internship and figure out from there. And she actually even told me, she goes, in reality, a lot of people think they want to do something, they intern.
Yes.
And they're like, no, actually, that's not what they want to do. So she was like, well, you go ahead and give it a shot, get your feet wet. And of course, where do they stick me? They stick me in the early morning hours where I had to wake up at 2 a.m, which is not far from what I'm doing now.
Wow.
So I was shadowing our morning producers, and I'm telling you, these people who work the overnight hours to get you the morning news, some of the hardest working people I know in the business, because they're coming in at 11 p.m., midnight, and they're starting to write. And I don't know how their brains are even functioning.
A lot of coffee or no? I mean, how do you do it? That is crazy.
It's crazy.
Wow.
And so it was actually here at the ABC affiliate in San Diego. That's where I interned at 10 News. And so they trusted me. They gave me a couple of stories to write every now and then. I was really excited to always hear the anchors read it. I was like, oh my gosh, I wrote that. They're reading my words. Like, and eventually, I was just really persistent. In news, they're very, very busy. And even though you intern, it's not guaranteed they'll always have something for you to do because they're so busy. So I would ask every single day, what can I help you with? What can I help you with? I asked everyone, from the anchors to the writers, to the producers, to the directors, to people, I didn't even know what they did. I know they're just in the building. So I'm like, hey, do you need any help today? And most of the time I was like, no, like, get out of my way. I'm doing something. But eventually they looked for the girl who was always asking to help. And so I ended up doing a big project for them one day. And I think that finally put my name at least in their minds. So when they knew, oh, we needed to hire a writer, I was like, hi, remember me? And they're like,
you're already here.
Christina. You want to write? And I'm like, yeah, put me in, sign me up. So as soon as I graduated, I had a job. I knew exactly what it's a little backwards if I go into like how you get into reporting and stuff, but I started out as a writer producer first instead of just going straight out the door as a reporter. So
would you
say
it's harder, just out of curiosity, like when you got into the news and obviously you had your unique path to it, do you think it's harder now to try to get into the news, to break into the industry compared to when you started?
Actually, I think it's, gosh, you know what? Technology has changed a lot.
Yeah.
I would say it was harder then only because back then if I wanted to be a reporter, I needed to create a reel, and then I would need to get DVDs to burn my reel on, and then physically, so you're broke, as a writer anyway, and then you're buying all these DVDs and you're sending like 50 of these reels out and paying for postage and doing all this stuff and just hoping someone actually sees it. So now you can upload your reel onto YouTube, and you can email a friend who like, oh, I know such and such works over here at NBC, and maybe if maybe they can send my reel over to the news. You know what I mean? It's a little easier in a sense because technology has made it easier. But there are also, now we have social media and we have the internet where we're watching a lot of live stream. A lot of news stations now have talent specifically just for their Facebook lives, how think about this. Like our internet producers, they can also be talent, but it's only online, and they're producing and they're filming themselves like selfie style, like, oh, this is what's going on, this is what's breaking, et cetera, watch our station for the latest, but they're also getting airtime, so to speak.
That's kind of interesting.
Has it,
yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's very interesting actually. And I'm just curious because I was so honored to have the opportunity, because I'm from San Diego as well. And I grew up in San Diego and had plenty of friends. I almost went to UCSD. I got accepted to go there, which is super cool. And I have this strong affinity for the news stations down there. I grew up, in a family and with grandparents. They watched all the news stuff, and news, I don't know why, but down in San Diego, it just seemed like you guys are a big part of our lives. Honestly, I felt like everybody kind of watched the San Diego news stations. Like KUSI was one I watched all the time. I remember reading through your bio on the Fox 5 San Diego News website. You mentioned something about the Union Tribune and doing some work with them as well. And I mean, all of that's home for me. And I see so much value in you guys in terms of the media and your presence in the culture of San Diego and everything that you guys bring to what makes San Diego so special. In my eyes, but seems like it is more competitive now to bring the news and be relevant with all that stuff going on. How do you guys manage competing? Because it is kind of competing for the audience with all the other stuff. Has you guys transitioned to be more digital as well, or what's kind of been that, how you guys have handled that new competition?
Well, it's interesting because I would say that digital is such a huge part. So if your station doesn't have an actual digital team, you're struggling. You know what I mean? At this point, because you need someone who's going to handle the station's website, and then the station's Twitter, and the station's Facebook. And then if they have a station Instagram, you're handling that too. And then now, most stations are requiring their talent. You've got to have Instagram, you've got to have Twitter, you've got to have all these things. So before, when I would report, when I was a reporter, it's like, okay, I would report, I'd be done. It became, no. When you're done with your report, you have to send a web script. So now you've got to write differently. Now it's AP style. You got to send it to the digital team, who will then edit your copy and then push it toward the website. And then all of a sudden it was, hey, are you out at the scene and it's breaking news? And all I'm thinking is I've got to get the facts so I can make my 5 p.m. hit, because we're live at 5 p.m. But if it's 3:30, they're probably texting me, why did NBC just tweet this out? And I'm like, oh, yeah, yes, about that. Okay, wow. So then now I'm grabbing my phone and I'm taking video of the scene even before. So it's so funny because you bring up a good point, John, that before families could depend on getting the very latest news on 5 p.m., 6 p.m., or whatever hours, they were watching, and you could tease ahead and you could say, hey, here's the story, here's the latest, and we're going to bring that to you at these hours, and you could expect it then. Now you're just getting it as a notification on your phone as soon as it happens. So it's more eyes, more ears, and fast fingers.
Yeah.
Because you were just...
Now this is a question that I don't know if it's okay to answer or appropriate to. I'll ask it and you can tell me if you can say this is, I can't really answer that question, but do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing that the information is coming out so quickly when it's happening without all the facts being gathered, because personally I feel like that's where we can get into a lot of trouble in terms of saying stuff and not really having the full story in place. Then all of a sudden anybody that's in media could then be a part of misleading, their audience and having to go back and correct certain things. But that's kind of tough to do that, because once they hear something, they kind of act upon that news as if that's all the information they needed to make a good decision or to have a clear understanding of something that's happening in the world or locally in their area. Or how do you feel about, I would say, John, the news coming out so quickly?
Just to add to what you're saying, if you make a mistake, now it'll be held against you as that person lied in whatever they reported, and we can't trust that news station anymore. And it seems there's a very strong sense of this in social media, especially.
Well, yeah. So to answer John's question, but John, you pretty much answered it. There's I think it's good and it's bad. It's great in a sense that, because our society now relies on fast information, we want things delivered quickly. We want that instant gratification. So for me, in my mind nowadays, it's like, why am I going to wait to watch the 6 p.m. news if I can get it at 2 p.m.?
Yeah.
So there's that added pressure, I feel like now, for journalists to, wait, what did I just hear? Let me confirm that, and then let me send it out. Now, here's the thing. We do, as journalists, should not forget that we have a responsibility. So just because we can deliver the information a lot quicker, we can send out a notification, we can send out a tweet, we should know better than that. Like, just because you have to confirm things. You have to know your source. Is it a credible source? Are you getting this from officials? Or are you getting this from, just a man on the street, which is obviously not what they're going to do. I will say that a lot of people do jump the gun. And it's happened, and we've seen it happen. So yes, there's a chance of that happening. And then, Brian, you were just saying that, well, then you look like a liar, and now the station's, got to suffer for it. And I would hope, here's the thing. I would hope that people did understand that, journalists they're humans too. I'm not asking, for people to be like, oh, poor journalists, nothing like that. Because we're held to a certain standard, we're held to a certain responsibility. If we can't deliver the news accurately, if we can't be accurate, if we can't be responsible, we have no business being in this field anyway. So it's funny because, and I will say that there are some stations who strive on that, who are like, oh, breaking, and then send it out. And okay, where did you hear that from? Did you get it from at least 2 sources? Like, whereas I can say that our news director, he goes, hold up. I want to make sure it is clear as day, where you're getting your information from and it's correct. If you have even the slightest inkling where you're asking, should I tweet this or should I send this out? You shouldn't be doing it anyway, because you should be getting a hold of us, getting a hold of management, and you talk to us. And if, we'll talk about it. And if not, you should not be sending out that information anyway. So it just goes back to the journalists. What is your responsibility? What are you trying to prove? For me, I'd rather be late by 10 minutes if it means it's going to save me and save, my station's
that
space
makes a lot
too.
of sense.
So
it seems like that's the standard that you guys have. When I do check out your guys' website and look at the news clips and stuff that you guys do, it just seems like overall that there's a really unique sense of family and great culture that you guys have at your news station, and a certain standard too. I mean, I'm very fortunate to be connected to Rafael Morales. We grew up together. I've known him for, I don't know, 30 years. I think it's 20, 30 years, something like that. Like over 20 years. And he's my brother. He's like a brother to me. And knowing Rafael, he has such a high standard, and I know that when he talks about the news station, the culture, the way in which you guys as a team approach stories and approach things, I mean, for me, I'm super confident in you guys and how you guys approach it, and that's the sense that I got even when I was there, being on set. And again, thank you so much for interviewing me and allowing me to share our company story on behalf of Brian and our team, the Go Be More story. But I feel like that's the standard you guys have. So I asked the question quite confidently, knowing that that's what your guys' standard is. But I feel like a lot of people, speaking for those who gets to listen to this interview, that's the question they have is what standard are these news stations and the media outlets and the journalists really adhering to? Because it seems a lot like the Wild West in a lot of ways now, where it's just people are just gunslinging and sending out stuff because it's clickbait. They want to get the information out. They want to be the first to report it. But I don't really think that is. I think that's part of the game, but that's not part of your brand. So I think it depends on the brand of the media outlet as well. Like some people just want to get stuff out, and some people just want to get it right. And I feel like you guys are a part of the group that wants to get it right.
Well, and you just, I don't know. Could you imagine what it would feel like if you had broke some story and it turns out to be false? Like, I just don't know what I'm doing with myself. Right. Gosh, I'd have to get out of news. I think that every news station, I can't speak for every single one. I've worked at several, but like news directors, they come and go as well. So it just really depends who's spearheading the newsroom and what values they're bringing. And I think the reason why, John, you've noticed we are so family oriented at Fox 5 is because we really are. That is the culture. That's the priority. I have never been in a news station where the news director is very critical of how we all interact with each other in the newsroom. I know other newsrooms where people are afraid to laugh, because it's just, we're on it. We got to be on it. It's news, which is fine, and it's great. And that's their brand, and you go to Fox 5, but there's also a reason why people look at us out in the field and our competitors are like, wow, you guys really all do get along.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's because our boss, he's made sure that is the culture.
That's wonderful.
And it helps. It helps in this type
Christina,
of field.
you mentioned in the beginning, it seems like writing was maybe the first thing you really dove into, or that you really attracted you to the news. I'm curious about how writing has played a role for you, and consistently, and then in general, how you've developed some of these other skills, or how you've approached doing this in order to further your career.
We can hear all that. That's
Is that your mom?
Yeah, she came down for a snack.
That is so funny.
I know. I know. So sorry. She's like, she's got the microwave on. I was like, oh no.
No
So
problem. We are
sorry.
probably a couple minutes away from my daughter's coming in.
It's funny because my mom, she's actually been staying with us for the last couple months because sorry, side.
Sure,
And I'm going to
sure.
answer your question shortly here, but they live in the Philippines. They're retired.
Wow.
They moved back to the Philippines. But when this pandemic hit, she was in the middle of, taking care of her mom in Virginia and going back to the Philippines. So she stopped here, and literally that's when everything closed down. The airports in the Philippines have been closed to international flights. So she's pretty much stayed here for the last 2 months, and she just got a flight out tomorrow. So she's getting her stuff ready, and I can see her kind of walking around, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
Oh, that's too funny. Wow. How has she been handling all of that? I mean, it's probably great being able to be with you, but that's unexpected, I guess, right? Oh,
right.
wow.
I mean, the best you can possibly think. My whole thing was just as long as she's healthy, but the hard part is that, hold on.
Does she want to say hi?
She's like, no. My dad was in the Philippines, so my dad's been home alone for months now. So they've talked every day, but I know that my mom just, as a mother, she's just like, I gotta get back. I gotta make sure your dad's okay. He's doing the best he can.
Yeah.
And it's a little harder because he's stuck in a third world country. So anyways, okay, I'm sorry.
No problem. It's all good.
I just was afraid she was going to start turning on the water, and I was just like, it's going to get so loud. So I'm sure you can edit all that out.
The question was about writing in general, and then sort of developing your other skills to be more well-rounded in your career path.
Okay, so it's interesting because I got into news as a writer. That's how I started. I was a writer, film and producer, and eventually producing, and I did that for about 3 years. It's a little backwards, only because when you're in college, you want to be a reporter. Typically, you go to a school for journalism, you're able to create a reel, and then you send it out across the US, because chances are you're gonna get your first start in a smaller town, a smaller market, to get your feet wet, to make all your mistakes, earn your stripes, and then you can get into a larger market like San Diego and then work your way up from there. But I just wanted to get my foot in the door. So here I am in San Diego. It's really difficult to get into a reporting role right off the bat because they want years of experience. So I just figured, hey, you know what? Just keep it cool. Let's go in and get your feet wet this way. And it's funny because I actually hated it.
Really?
In the beginning, because it's not what I wanted to do. I enjoy writing, don't get me wrong. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to be able to report and eventually get to be an anchor. So there were, in those 3 years, and when you're young, you feel like every day it's like, okay, what am I doing? What am I doing? And I hated it. I hated coming into work knowing that I was going to produce. And to be honest, I'm not a good producer. I'm not a good producer.
How do you say that?
Oh.
I don't.
It's a completely different skill set, and I was terrible at it. Probably shouldn't say that out loud. Oh my gosh. I used to produce at Fox 5 when we launched. It's such a funny story. But, and I asked my boss, who is still my boss today, if he would allow me to be a reporter. And he said, no. You don't know anything about reporting. And I was like, yes, I do. I produce and I do all this stuff. And at the end of the day, what ends up happening is, so I got a later start to become a reporter. However, what that did, writing and producing for those first 3.5 years, it really built such a solid foundation for me. So the moment that I finally came back to San Diego and I started reporting, and for Fox 5, I knew exactly what the producers wanted. So I knew exactly what they were thinking. I knew what they needed. So I was thinking like a producer when I was out in the field. They never had to think twice about what I was doing because I always gave them what they needed, even before they asked.
Wow.
And it was funny because it was my executive producers who were like, do you realize what you have over these other reporters? So they're still going out there and they're only thinking about themselves. And I'm not, don't get me wrong. We have great reporters. It's just you open yourself up to this hold on, I see something. I know that the producer is going to need this. I'm just going to send it to them right now. I don't know if that makes sense, but you're just naturally thinking about how it's like behind the scenes. So it makes my job a whole lot easier because now I understand both sides.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. To me, I feel like the two things, one is paying your dues and doing something that it's not exactly what you want to be doing. But I always say this when I'm talking with my students. Sometimes the skills you're learning, you don't know how you're going to use them. You don't really know what doors you're going to open up by taking this particular class or by investing time to study this topic or whatever. You don't know until later. And it's in hindsight, you'll be like, oh, I'm so glad I took that class, or I'm so glad I spent those 3 years doing producing, even though it wasn't what I wanted to do. And it's tough though in the moment to decide, do I stay on this path or do I move on? Because like I heard this quote somewhere recently, and the quote was, in everybody's career path, they face a choice. You have to decide to work harder or quit. And it struck me as, it's really hard if you're doing something that you think potentially opens up doors for you, but there's no guarantee.
Sure.
Do you just keep working harder, or do you, or do you not? And there's no right answer. That's the funny thing about it, is there literally is no right answer. For some people, the right answer is to quit and go do something that's more appropriate for what they want to pursue. And for others, it's to double down. And it sounds like you paid your dues, and then eventually those doors did open up for you.
And it's oh my gosh, how much time do you have? It's such a funny story. I actually quit news.
Oh wow!
Did you really? Okay, so no, I did not know.
In this whole process, I know, right? That's why I asked. I'm like, how much time? So, so I had produced for 3.5 years. Like I mentioned, I started at 10 News, and I ended up at Fox when we launched in 2008. And during that time, I was still sending out my reel. I was still sending it out. And, it's hard. It was hard to get bites. And there were times that I was just like, oh, when is this going to happen for me? And I hated what I was doing at the time. And then finally I get my first gig. It was in Grand Junction, Colorado.
Wow.
So
you moved to Colorado.
I moved to Colorado. I signed a 2-year contract. Okay. I lasted 4 months.
Oh,
wow. Really?
I lasted 4 months. And oh my gosh. And the reason why it wasn't a bigger stink, if you will, is because I actually just left news. I think if I had stayed in news, they would have, I would have been sued. But no,
what was it at that time? I mean, was it just you were disillusioned by it, or was it a questioning?
So, what's funny is that I think it works. It's a little easier if maybe you're fresh out of the gate, you're fresh out of college, and you're like, okay, here it is, my first town as a reporter, and you don't know anything about news. I had just spent 3.5 years knowing how news looks like in San Diego, which is a much larger market. So my expectations and my standards are already so high. So you send me to a small town and I'm doing news, and I'm just like, what is happening? And I'm doing a one-man band. So I'm shooting, I'm editing, I'm writing, I'm producing all my stuff in heels with a tripod. And these cameras they had back then were heavy. So I'm doing all this work, and I'm making minimum wage. I'm living. It was my first time moving away from my family, because my whole family is still in San Diego at the time. And at the time, I was also engaged. There were a lot of things going on in my personal life. Yeah. I don't think I was mentally prepared for it. So when I was there and I'm doing it, I'm thinking, what am I doing? I'm not, I wasn't even able to make friends with the people in the newsroom because, they saw me coming in from San Diego and they're like, oh, okay, you think you're a hotshot? And I was like, no, not at all. But I think it just shows also insecurity in some people, like, wait, why are we hiring her? She's not brand new. Does that make sense? It was such a very awkward time. And the defining moment for me was, I had just learned that my dad was sick. He had just been hospitalized, and my family did not tell me. They hid it from me because they knew I was already depressed being so far. And that bothered me. And so here's the funny thing. So I signed this 2-year contract, right? And initially when I get there, the news director, she was such a sweet lady. She told me, so here's the deal. We're gonna get you started reporting. If you're good enough in maybe a year, we're gonna try to put you on the desk. I'd been working there for 2 months. 2 months. She pulls me in her office. Already it was only 2 months and I was already a wreck. I was already depressed. And she closes the door and she says, so yeah, you need to be on the desk. And I was like, what?
So you're
And I was like, what are you talking about? She goes, so we're going to have an opening soon. She goes, you think you're going to be able to do that? Do you think you'll be able to do the desk in the next 2 to 4 months? And you think that for me, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what I've been working for, is to be an anchor, even though it's in a small town. And you know what I did? I cried. I sat there and I started crying, and she goes, are these tears of joy? Or, we don't look like it. And I said, I can't. And that's when I knew, when I said no to the anchor position, it was, I said, I have to go home. I got to leave today. I was like, I got to go. And I had a meltdown in her office. And I said, I can't, I got to go. I got to go home. And she said, wait, are you going home to pursue news? Like, what is it? And I mean, I don't even remember. I knew I was a mess, and there were so many things happening in my life. Again, my dad was hospitalized, he was sick, and I was just like, I want to go home and take care of my family. And so she said, give me time to find a replacement and we'll let you go.
Wow.
Yep.
And so, and you never hear that happening. You don't hear that happening. And so I finished another 2 months. So it was 4 months and I was gone. I quit news. And I blamed everything else except for myself. I blamed everything else around me.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, oh, it wasn't as cool as I thought it was going to be. And gosh, it's like, just, I'm going to say it. It's just your typical, 24, 25-year-old thinking they know everything.
Yeah.
Entitled, like, everyone wants to sparkle. They don't want to polish. I had that mentality. And so I stopped. I didn't do news for, it was 2.5 years. I took a break.
No way.
And during that time, you were just taking care of your family, or were you literally doing an entirely different career?
I went into financial services.
Okay.
Wow.
I'm telling you, it's a funny story. I needed a paycheck because I came home and, okay, so now what am I going to do? I had a friend who was working for Ashford University at the time. And she's like, do you need a job? Yeah. She got me an interview. And so here I am working at Ashford University as a financial services coordinator, talking to students about their financial aid and things like that. And you know what's funny? Getting out of news, I still had the mentality of being in news. So anytime they gave me a project, I was like, well, when do you need this by? And I'm thinking end of business. And they're like, oh, you got 2 weeks. I was like, excuse me?
Wow.
I'm used to like giving you something by the end of the day. So that helped. And I became a manager quick. So I had 3-day weekends. I had holidays off. I was spending more time with my family.
Christina, what year was this? When was this?
Oh gosh, 2010.
Wow.
2010. Okay.
2011. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because I want to get to around 2013. I know this is like you're in the Philippines and you're a reporter again. And now I have no idea. How did you make this transition back to the news?
So another accident that I say accident, don't believe in it. But as I'm at Ashford and I'm fine, I'm content. You know, I'm good. I happen to meet up with some of my old news friends over lunch. And one of them mentions that she just signed with the San Diego Union Tribune, but it's a newspaper. I'm thinking, how are you going from broadcast to newspaper? She goes, no, they're starting UTTV. So it's a television station within the newspaper. It was a project that was being, that was launched by basically the new owner. And so it was completely brand new. And she said, have you ever thought about coming back into news? And I said, no. First of all, I couldn't. I said, they're not going to take me. I have 4 months of on-air experience. You need years to get into a market like San Diego. And she said, Christina, she goes, send me what you have. We're looking for a couple reporters. They may not pay well, but we might need someone. And I thought, oh yeah, right. And I couldn't sleep that night.
Wow.
So I sent her what I had. I don't even remember what I sent her. And I got a call from her news director 2 days later. He was like, you in or you out?
Jeez.
I was like, what?
Wow.
And I mean, talk about, I left this job. I left news. And all of a sudden and it seemed like too good to be true. when they say it's too good to be true, don't take it. I mean, the pay wasn't great, but it was definitely being able to suddenly do news again in San Diego. So I was like, sure, I'll do it. Took a pay cut and everything just to get back in. And it opened the door for me to travel. It was the only time I did travel overseas to do a story. But I mean, I was reporting just for the UT and its website. That's all it was. And then suddenly this typhoon hits in the Philippines, and San Diego, the newspaper editors knew that, we have the second largest Filipino American population in the US. So they knew that they needed to tackle this story. And I remember joking around during one of their briefings. I'm like, well, you guys should send me.
Wow.
If you're going to send a reporter out there, you should send me. I mean, I can speak the language, and I mean, not very well, but I can speak it. Joking, thinking there was no chance. And it was that night, 10 p.m., I got a call from an editor. They were like, so can you really go? Oh, wait, is this serious? And they said, it was like 36 hours before they were going to send their photographer. So if you're going to go, we need to know. I'm like, yeah. And we'd no idea. Like, I had no idea what I was getting myself into.
That's so cool.
So there it was. So then, 2 weeks.
2 weeks in the Philippines, and you do a ton of reporting about it's the typhoon Haiyan. Yeah, I can't. I was looking it up, and then I realized in the Philippines they called it Yolanda, which is a much better name for me. So you spent 2 weeks, and you ended up winning an Emmy for your reporting there, if I understand correctly.
Yes, I did, and it's so interesting because, first of all, I had no idea that was even an option. I had no idea that we were even going to send our work in to be potentially nominated. And even when we were nominated, I thought, really? Because when we were out there, it was such an experience that changed my life that it almost didn't feel right to win something for it. Because I had gained more going there than you go to a town that's been completely leveled, and there were many of them, but completely leveled. You had people who had lost family members, who had lost friends. Their entire livelihoods were gone. And we get the opportunity to come in there as Americans, and they're looking at us like we're movie stars. And I'm like, no. And just even that they're, I look at the world around us now, and people are living in fear, but we're, most of us are blessed to have homes and, something to go home to. And they were intense. Yeah. And it's still raining. So talk about PTSD. The typhoon, the largest typhoon that had hit their country, took out everything, and it's still raining at night. People were still screaming and running for the hills at night. Oh my gosh. Yeah, because they were still so scared. And so again, it's like being around those people and watching them. And you would, honestly, if you had not seen the ruin around us, you wouldn't know that they were devastated, because they walked around smiling, full of love. It was Christmas. This happened in November. So it was right before Christmas. They created Christmas trees out of the rubble. They were singing Christmas carols. It was hard not to walk around wanting to cry every single moment, because I felt like I didn't deserve to even be in their presence. So then to win an Emmy for telling their story, I was like, how is that even right? So it holds a very dear place in my heart, just because it was, again, they gave me more than I could have ever experienced from anyone else.
It sounds like it. It sounds like once in a lifetime experience and a life-changing experience for you to be there.
Do you have any connections this many years later to that story now? Like, is there anything that you do with it in terms of involvement with the communities that were affected by it? Because it seems like it does have such a strong tie now to your career so many years later.
Well, the short answer is no. And only because, first of all, so you think of a third world country, and it's not like we were in a city. We were in the provinces. It took 48 hours to get to the place that we were getting to, by plane, by boat, by van, so it took a long time, because, they're in the rural country. And so even their internet connection, from what I remember, I know we didn't have access to it. I don't know if that was just because of the catastrophe that just has happened, but I mean, they're so far. They're so far from the city and so far from everything else. I think about some of the people that I had met.
Wow.
I have like specific moments that I think about and I wonder about them, and I hope they're well. And I think they are. They were so resilient when we got there that I can't imagine that they're, not
Right.
okay.
Right. No, and
Yeah.
I think that the coolest thing about, at least my 2 cents on it, is, first of all, is that the award behind you, by the way? I'm looking at it like, man, that's so pretty, that's so cool. But I my 2 cents on it is this, and I kind of feel like Brian and I and our team, with launching a podcast, is, at least a marketing arm of our brand, but we see it as so much more than just a way to talk, to kind of get our brand out there. Brian and I really do feel a sense of responsibility, and also I feel like it's an honor to be able to share inspirational stories, to tell everybody's story. Anybody that we get to connect with and have an opportunity to have them share their story, it's great because it reminds all of us that we all have a story to tell. And I feel like that's what you're doing for the people that were affected by the typhoon. I feel like the recognition is actually great because it's also recognition of what was happening and the fact that you did such a good job talking about it, and reporting on it. And it was recognized for that level of excellence that you guys executed on sharing what was happening out there. And the fact that you were recognized with the award, I feel like it's a great way to kind of like put something in the ground and say, hey, don't forget what happened,
Yeah.
And so I think it's great. I think it is really great that you guys were recognized for it, and I think that that's a testament to how well you guys did it.
Well,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So good job. Great job.
Christina, do you?
Yeah, no,
go ahead, John.
I was just gonna say, are there other stories that you've reported on that you have a strong connection to and can think back on fondly now, as far as like what you've done over the years?
There's so many. I mean, I reported for 5 years in total before I went into my anchor position. So if you think about it, you have a new story pretty much every single day you walk in. So sometimes that question's like, oh gosh, I can't think. But I would have to say that out of a lot of the stories that I've done, the ones that I will always remember are the human interest stories. Because it is such an honor to tell. I mean, if you think about breaking news, there's a house fire and things like that. That in its own is a completely different beast. It's like being able to report on something where you have no information and going to a scene and trying to dig for anything that you can. That's a completely different thing. But when you have time to actually really speak to people and get to know their story, one thing comes to mind. There was a girl here who needed a kidney transplant and went so many years and couldn't find anyone, couldn't find a match, and she had deteriorated quickly, and so she was getting bad news left and right. And meantime, her cousin, who was actually in the Philippines at the time, had a dream. Randomly had a dream. His father, who had already passed, he had a dream of his father, and his father had always told him that he would donate his own kidney to his niece. But he died before he could do that. So now her cousin is having a dream of his dad, and he wakes up and he goes, I think it was a sign. I've got to do it.
Wow.
So he gets tested in the Philippines, finds out he's a match, and they have to fly him all the way over here to Sharp, where he goes through everything and they go through this kidney transplant. And so it's stories like that. And when you hear it and you're just like, what?
Wow.
And being a woman of faith myself, I'm like, yeah, no, that was not an accident. I keep saying this term accident, and it's not. Everything happens for a reason. And if you pay attention and you actually listen, so for him to listen, he says he had a dream of his dad, and he just knew. It's not like his dad spoke to him in his dream. He woke up and he was like, something about Bianca, her name was Bianca. He's like, something about Bianca. I got to figure out what this is. And he just did. Yeah. So
Those are great stories.
Those are the kind of stories that I remember that will stick with me.
Absolutely. Yeah. Christina, I want to make sure we ask you about being an anchor, because it seemed like where you wanted to be back in high school was behind the desk as an anchor, and you had a roundabout journey. Like I'm sure every anchor has somewhat of a roundabout journey to get there, but you definitely had your long journey to get there, and now you're doing it. So how has that been? What have you been learning? Are you enjoying what you're doing now? Can you talk a little bit about being an anchor on the news?
It's amazing. It's a lot of fun. It's so much fun. And I can't believe it most of the time that I get to do this in the city that I wanted to call home. And that was my goal for so long. I'm like, I just want to get to the anchor desk in San Diego. I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, I want to be in New York. I want to do these big things and national things. I was like, I just want to be an anchor in San Diego. And that was my goal. And to finally get here, man, it's challenged me in many ways. It's humbled me in many ways. It makes me want to be better every single time, only because it's so funny. Like after, say there's a breaking news story, I'll always think to myself during the break, oh, I could have said this, and I should have delivered it this way, and how oftentimes do we do that? Doesn't matter what industry you're in. So I can say that it's equally challenging as it is exciting, just because you don't know what you're going to get. You do have those days they're very cookie cutter, and you're like, that was a good day, no technical issues or what have you. And then there are days when major news hits, and that's why you're called the anchor, because then you've got to hold the show down, and you've got to think on your feet, and you've got to be able to, the thing is, I think you just have to be able to connect with your viewer, and not just for trust's sake, but it's just because it's a privilege to be in their home. Me, I do the early morning. So I'm doing 4:30 to 6 a.m. And I've been doing it by myself since the pandemic hit, and I can't have a co-anchor. So it's just been me. And for me, the people who are still working, or who are working during this time and are up at that hour, I know those kind of people. I mean, I know that they're law enforcement. I know that they're nurses. I know that these people, if they're tuning in to watch me, that's a privilege. And I cannot take that for granted. So the way that I can tell the story, and it's not just being an anchor, but can I do it? Can I be warm? Can I be genuine? Can they feel that? Can they feel that I'm feeling this story with them without doing too much? I don't know if that makes sense, but it is definitely, I don't even know if that's something that you can teach, because I really think that's just part of the human aspect of it. There is being an anchor, and you have to be an anchor, and you've got to hold down the show. But when you are storytelling, especially during times like now, can they still feel that you're still human and you're going through the same thing?
Can I ask you a question, Christina, about that? So I recently saw, I think her name is Hoda. She's a news anchor. I think maybe it's the Today Show or something like that. She was interviewing.
Right.
She was interviewing Drew Brees, and recently, and he had done something pretty magnanimous. But this is just Drew Brees, the kind of character that he is, the kind of human being that he is. He donated like $5 million or something like that, and he's probably good. I think he said he was going to even do more. But Drew Brees is like one of the few people in sports, not just in the NFL, but that really just goes above and beyond. Like genuinely, this guy cares. And she was talking to him, and I think they have a pretty good relationship as well. So I think they've known each other for a long time. She finished talking about what he had done, and COVID-19 really had just started hitting hard across the globe, and she's reporting by herself, and her other news anchor partners is doing it from home, I think. But she was not.
Oh, yes, you're right.
Yeah, so
she
she started crying after she was taught to Drew, and she broke down. And her news anchor partner, they showed her, and she just said, "Oh, Hoda," and she's just like, saying that it's just really hard holding that front, and then not letting that human side come out too much, and then she started crying, and it was so
Yes.
beautiful to see that. And so I think it's wonderful that you tap into that, because that was probably one of the most touching. Even I get a little emotional saying it right now. Like, one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen, and to see that in a news anchor means so much, I think, to all of us, because you're like, oh, they really do care.
They're going
through it too.
And then
You know?
there's a fine line, I think, because it's funny because you don't want to be too emotional, because you don't want to sway what people
Right.
are thinking. You know, that's the
Right.
whole thing. It's, we're going to deliver it, and then you're free to take it however you need to take it. But you know, there are times you're still human. You're still human at the end of the day, and I mean, every time we show like a military, anything military, and some type of reunion, I can't help it. I'm like, I need tissue. Like when I'm not on camera, I'm like, tissue. I need tissue, because you know, behind the scenes, I'm like, "Ah," and then you know, like trying to compose myself so when we come back to it, I'm okay. But
It's like, yeah, anytime there's a story of like a military dad comes back and surprises his kid or something like
Yes.
that, I'm just like, oh God, it doesn't matter how much I'm prepared for this story. Like,
You're gonna cry every time.
I can't handle this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
Well, there's this professionalism that you have to sort of maintain,
Absolutely,
and
yeah.
officialness, and yet I agree with John that when you can show your humanity without like losing your professionalism, it just has so much more impact. Actually, I don't know how to do it. I don't think it's something that you can like force. I think it has to come out of the situation and your natural personality and your natural reaction to it. And I think good anchors are able to, I don't know, choose their spots and control when they need to control and be people when they need to be people.
Right. Fine line.
Very fine line. I can't even imagine it in the moment, because the decisions are happening in the moment. I'm sure you're not going in and going, you know, tomorrow's story, I am definitely going to be a human.
Yeah.
So we're approaching the end here, Christina, of the interview. And, you know, our whole mission as Go Be More is to encourage people to pursue their dreams and to have a mindset of making incremental progress, continuing to push for whatever it is that they want to, if they want to do it, to make those steps. And I'd like to sort of ask you what you see sort of for you, what the future holds. What are you pursuing today? It could be personal and professional, whatever you choose to talk about, but and how you're going about it, and just what is your sort of Go Be More challenge that you're taking on?
Well, right now it is more personal, only because I love what I'm doing. I love the city in which I'm anchoring. So I don't have any plans on leaving anytime soon, and I'm hoping that the station feels the same way. Hopefully they will renew my contract and keep me. You know, there's always that in the back of your mind, but I don't have any plans on leaving on that side, at least yet. But you know, I'm newly married, so I'm thinking we want to have a family. So it's funny, and that seems all great and it's fine, but I work a really odd shift.
Yes.
So for me now, when I think of Go Be More, I think of myself, okay, so I've done this now. I can report, I can anchor. Can I do all that while being a mom? Like, that's now my Go Be More. It's, can I do the same things? Can I have the same energy? Can I still have the same impact, you know, that I'm doing now while raising a child and, you know, holding a family down? I have no idea.
Yeah.
I'm very hopeful though. So that part, I'm just, yeah, that's a personal goal of mine. So
No,
I don't know if that really fits.
Of
Of
course,
course it fits.
yes.
Yeah, of course. This is like, life is not just about what you're doing for your job. We all have these pursuits, and John will agree with this. We talk about this all the time. Like, we're trying to build a company, but we have kids and we have spouses and partners. We want to be well-rounded. We want to be, we don't want to overweight one aspect more than the other, but we can always kind of make progress in all these areas. And I have no doubt that you will figure out how to do
Yeah.
how to do
I'm
this.
hopeful. I'm definitely hopeful.
I don't know how you do the morning shift anyway. So that's that to me is the fact that you can do that means of course you can be a mom. You do the morning shift.
You know what's funny is there's 4 of us in the morning. Well, 4 females. So all 3 of them, aside from me, they all have kids. So I've watched them go through the process. I've watched the pregnancy, and then I've watched here comes one kid, and then there's the second child, and then one of my other co-makers has 4 kids, all under the age of 8. Listen,
wow.
you talk about real strong women, and it's great because for a long time getting into this business, you're told you have to choose. Do you want your career? You want a family? So I think that's also part of my getting out too, because I was like, well, I want a family. I was raised to be that type of person. So there was a lot of back and forth, but now, I have the opportunity, and I'm like, I'm excited. I'm scared, and I'm excited at the same time.
Oh, that's fantastic.
That's so beautiful. No, I think I'm with Brian. I feel like you're such a strong person. Your story is truly inspirational for sure. I think that the journey that you've been on, you tell it very well, and I just wanted to mention, I feel like culturally it's important to be able to talk about your journey in terms of where you're from, so that others who share that same background feel inspired and empowered to go after similar goals. It might not necessarily be in news, but similar high. I mean, you've achieved a lot, and you've come very far in a very competitive industry. Do you feel, as a Filipina American, having that background, do you feel like a source of inspiration for your community and for little girls, especially, that look up to you now? Because you know that they do, and you know that they're there. Women should know that. Young girls should know that, and people should celebrate community. Our community as a whole should celebrate women who want to have both, because they should be able to have both. That's just my 2 cents on it. But I think that when somebody who's doing what you're doing is saying that and going after it wholeheartedly, it's very inspiring.
Well, thank you so much. It's always a weird thing, you say, do you think you're inspiring young, Filipina children or whatever it is? And it's weird because I'm always like, really? I'm like, I just went after, I had a dream. I put some goals down and I went after it. I had a few setbacks, but you persevere, you keep going. And I would get emails from people. I have gotten emails from people saying, thank you for being who you are. My daughter can watch the TV and see someone who looks just like her and can be proud of that and wants to watch you. And I'm always so humbled because I know what that's like. You know what I mean? I know what it's like to just see something and you're like, oh gosh, like how the way she carries herself and, makes you want to be a better woman, a stronger woman. And, so I can understand that. So to see it come back, I mean, it always knocks me off my feet. I'm like, oh, wow, that's a blessing. So
truly it is.
Christina, I think we're going to wrap up the interview here. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for bearing with all of our technical issues. Thank you for inviting your mom down to get some snacks. Honestly, for all the trouble that we had, which only us 3 know, for all the difficulties that we had in the beginning, I just had such a great time talking with you, and I'm so glad to be able to hear your story. And keep doing what you're doing, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh my gosh, pleasure was all mine. Thank you so much for having me. That was a lot of fun.
Of course, thank you.
Thank you all for tuning in. You can find links to any articles or items we referenced in the show notes. Please subscribe and be sure to give us a rating. And remember to tell a friend about the show. The Go Be More podcast is produced by Go Be More Apparel. Check us out at gobemore.co. For all of us at Go Be More, we are what the world is chasing, and we hope this podcast helps you become what the world is chasing too.